Okay, so just as a quick introduction, my name's John, and I experienced burnout around 2010, 2011, I think it was, working in the IT sector. Um, for me personally, it manifested as being in a state of migraine for 3 to 4 days every working week and becoming completely unable to really function. Um, and Qigong was interestingly part of the reason that I burnt out, but also my way of recovering from burnout. And I'd quite like to sort of have a play with these ideas. But yeah, if everybody would like to just say a little bit about themselves and what their experience is or what their interest is, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I'm Joe. Or Andrew, go for it. Go for it.
So I'm Andrew, and I've only been doing Qigong for a short time, about 5 years, I guess now. But before that, I was doing Tai Chi, and which I see as part of sort of one aspect of Qigong. Anyway, um, I'm not sure I've personally experienced burnout, but I've certainly experienced sort of bad situation. I mean, I think burnout is not anyway a sort of a precise definition, but I've experienced a couple of really difficult patches in my life, and I found it was in the Tai Chi period was one of them, and the other one was in the Qigong period, and I found I found the practice very helpful, but at the same time, especially in the first round, they were two different things anyway. But in the first experience, there was something that concerned me a lot, which is that my practice was definitely helping me. It was allowing me to cope with a very difficult situation, but I gradually got the feeling that it wasn't helping the situation. All that the practice was doing was allowing me to cope with higher and higher levels of stress and sort of manage, but there wasn't any exit. And this is something that I've heard John mention, and I think this is something very important to discuss, that we don't just use our practice to survive situations. We shouldn't be surviving those. We should be getting out of them. So that's perhaps my special angle. And otherwise, I just have a general interest in sort of consciousness and stuff like that. So I'm up for anything.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you.
That's a wonderful way to my story, I guess. I'm Joe, and I experienced burnout around 2017 somewhere. And I'm not so happy with the term burnout because it was more like burn in or something. I just adjusted myself so heavily to my colleagues and the work around and the big office that I gave up myself, and or that is the extract I got from that, I would say. And it was like, okay, I gave myself completely up and I can't see anything anymore. So I went at 8 into the office, and at 9 I couldn't see anything or read on the screen. It was like watching into the sunlight, and then you get like blinded and seeing just black spots. And that was my stopper. And I said to my chief, okay, I'm out. Maybe we don't see us again. I just care about myself, and stopped everything. And in 1 year with therapy, I completely switched my life in 180 degrees, and that was my escape. So,
Mhm.
and then I rediscovered Qigong because I haven't done that at this time, but I experienced Qigong the first time when I was 17. And then I rediscovered it through Anke and stuff, and the Qineng system, which was a more, I would say, open system and flexible system, not so very strict as I experienced before. So, which also creates stress. Yeah.
Thank you.
So me, So Abby, Tom's. I've had various health conditions there where I don't like the term burnout either, because it sounds a bit finite. Oh, burnt out, that's it, I'm done now. But it's more like extreme exhaustion that you can't push through, that you've got to do something different with. And I was a very anxious child, undiagnosed with ADHD and autism, full of tartrazine and caffeine and sugar in the 1970s and 80s, and a very bad work ethic. And I got very ill with ulcerative colitis in, when was it, 2002, 2003. I had to have my colon removed to save my life. I have a W pouch now. I won't go into too much detail there, but that's been its own challenge. And then becoming very aware of my body and what I needed to do, and learning Tai Chi and Qigong perhaps around 2018, 2020-ish. And it's really, really helped. And then I had a terrible menopause situation with terrible insomnia where I was only sleeping about 2 hours, if that, a night for a couple of months, constantly. And the doctor was like, "Oh, it's just one of those things. It's not menopausal. It has some antidepressants." I'm slowly decreasing off them now, 4 years later, and the Qigong has allowed me to do that, which has been amazing. But eventually they put me on HRT, and that probably saved my life. That's kind of, I've experienced times of exhaustion, and I think a lot of women go through this, and maybe a lot of men do at a certain stage. Maybe people do. You get to the point where you realise you're giving too much, and at what point do you think, actually, this isn't working for me, and I'm going to be, and you feel like you're being selfish for yourself, but you're not. You're just repairing your foundations that your life's built on. Your mental and physical health is built on your mental and physical health. You haven't got anything else. And there was a networking event I was doing at one point that was really early in the morning, once a week. And I was getting up, I don't mind getting up early in the morning as long as I get up at the same time, but I was getting up much earlier that morning, and it was upsetting my sleep pattern. And I remember feeling quite selfish and saying to them, "I can't do it anymore. I'm just going to do the online ones." And they were really nice about it, but they were all like, "Oh, we really miss you," and you feel obligated to go because they say that. But there's a moment where you go, "This is my boundary. This is what I need to do for me. I refuse to do any work on a Saturday unless it's an emergency, because I'm a website designer. Something goes down, I'm on it. It doesn't matter. But at least one day a week, I do my thing." And I do Tai Chi regularly on a Sunday, but it's important. It's taught me to have time for me. And that could be reading or watching telly or gardening or just vegging out on the sofa, or a nap. What I need to do for me to avoid burnout, you need to just take a step back and go, well, I'm a human, not a robot. And I think that the work ethic that I worked with in London right up to 2010 was this whole, you should be lucky, you should feel lucky just to have a job. Coming to work, even if your arm's hanging out of its socket and your eyeballs not there anymore, and people would come in with the worst coughs and colds and bronchitis. And I had a friend with asthma, and he ended up off work for 3 weeks because someone gave him this terrible bug that they could have just stayed home and not given him. Just the whole self-care thing needs to be emphasised, I think. That's me, as my point of view. And Qigong has helped me recover from things recently, which has been incredible, especially lift you up, put you down. It's allowed me to go on a lower dose of antidepressants than I've ever been on since 2022. So that's pretty amazing for me, because I look like I can come off them now, whereas all the issues they caused with my bowel problem were insurmountable. But now they lift you up, put you down. It helps my body retain go back to a homeostasis. So I'm cutting down slowly. So it's good. So Qigong helps me in that way.
I think it's interesting when you sort of come around, and I don't want this to be a rounded conversation where it's your turn, I'd like us all to jump in. We'd kind of got an idea of where we were going to go with this, which was, what's before, what is during, and what is after burnout. But, what's just come up here is, what the hell is burnout, and what do we mean by it, and why don't we like the term? And I think that's a really interesting question, because I don't think it's a term that I used probably, certainly for many, many years after my experience. My experience I'd put down as stress. I think I described it as, what was the term? Basically work stress. But the point that I recognize in it, and this is why I thought the before, during, and after was interesting, was there was a point during that I would do anything in order to keep my job. I would do anything in order to keep providing income for my family. At which point I was on a downward spiral, and there was nothing that anybody could have done in that process to prevent me bottoming out. The question was, at what point am I going to bottom out? And to me, that's kind of that place of burnout where it feels as if there aren't any options, and you may not even realize that you're in that situation. But if someone's offering sort of support or help or suggestions, it just all gets battered away as, no, it won't work for me. That feels like it's somewhere in there I would consider the place of burnout.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So from that perspective, I'm going to throw something in here, which is, in that place, Qigong is utterly useless and potentially damaging. because, what are you going to use it for? Oh, sorry, I'm on a soapbox. I'm going to carry on for a moment. Um, if I look at my
Because I
personal...
blocked John. Okay, go on.
Okay, I'm just going to kind of come back to something that Andrew said. In that place, my Qigong practice felt very strong because my Qigong practice every day was helping me cope. And so therefore the sense of coping needed to have a high degree of relaxation, a high degree of rebalancing, which created a very strong sensation of practice. So that as well fooled me into thinking that I was doing something helpful, and I really wasn't.
At what point did you make a change? Did you just get out of that job? What was the turning point? What did you go, hang on, I've got to change something in my life now? What sort of led you to that moment?
Personally, for me, I'd been signed off work with work-related stress for a period of time, and I was working for an American organization that will remain nameless, and you won't find any links back to them either on LinkedIn, so don't go looking. And they turned around and they said, right, they sent me a letter saying, we are clawing back all of the pay that we've paid you over this period. We are firing you with immediate effect. And there is no, so basically, not only are you not going to get any more pay, we're also going to claw back. I think it was just over a month's pay. And at that point, I went, I need to do something different. So it was at the point that the very nature of my relationship with my work, which was providing food and shelter, it was at that point that it broke. And that's why I think it's so interesting when you look at Maslow's hierarchy. And the bottom section of Maslow's hierarchy, which is about providing food and shelter, and going, how do we provide that in our daily lives? Because if we're to believe Maslow, and I think there's a fair amount of sort of sense within that, what will we do to protect our most foundational need? And I think more often than not, our most foundational need gets tied in with our ability to earn money. So therefore it gets related back to work. Sorry, Andrew, please go for it. Stop me talking.
Yeah. So with this idea of very, very basic needs, of course there are those physical needs, but there's also fundamental emotional needs. And I think part of what work does, especially for anybody who's in any way creative in their work, is it's a kind of security thing. You give a lot to your work, and in some way you feel part of a team, part of a family, part of something bigger than yourself. And that's really, really powerful, and it's not optional. It's something you absolutely need. And the thing is, and your work can be that if you're in a good team, if you're in a good company, or you're just doing work which is really worthwhile. That's not a bad thing to have. But what I got from your quick story was that that emotional side of the deal got completely broken. I mean, of course, they also broke the legal and the financial side, but they broke any kind of feeling that you had that you were in this together with them, and that you were doing so much beyond the call of duty for the sake of the team, for the company, for the work, for the clients, for whatever, but for the greater good. You were putting so much in, and suddenly they just killed their side of the contract. And at that point, first of all, you don't owe them anything now in any way, but also you realize that this deep need, which is we all have, you're not going to get it from there. So they cut you free, literally. They cut you free from that feeling that you were obliged to do beyond what is normal. But also, I think perhaps they forced you to realize that you're not going to get what you're looking for from us.
It's like that's really insightful.
Yeah.
There's a YouTube video I watched yesterday about something, and about something to do with psychology, and I realised it said your worth is not tied to your usefulness to others. And when you're a creative person, like I'm a designer, and I absolutely have, and perhaps lots of people, we provide a service in that department. It could be landscaping, and it could be writing, it could be very different things. You give so much of yourself, but you're not really told how much to give and how much to keep for yourself. And you can give and give and give. And I was broken by the place I worked for because it was such a toxic environment to work in 2010. I had 2 months off work with stress, but I didn't really. The reason I asked you, John, at what point you were broken by them. They shut the door and they kind of cut you loose in such a horrific way. It's terrible to treat anyone. With me, I just couldn't do it anymore. What was I going to say? But I can remember feeling that the months running up to it, perhaps a year, thinking, are things as bad as I think they are, or is it all in my head? And I
Yeah.
almost think that's a funny thing to think, because it is in my head, and is it all in my head? Am I being a drama queen here? Is it? And I've come to the conclusion, and I'm flexible on this, if it's as bad as you think it is, it probably is. Or it's at least, you can't see how depressed you are. You can only feel it in your head. Or not depressed or struggling. But if you're struggling with an emotional, stressful, or any kind of psychologically challenging thing, it's not like it's a bruise on your arm you can see, or a cut, or an inflamed part of your body. You can't see it. So you kind of feel like, well, how much am I imagining this? And I think the thing is we gaslight ourselves because we don't want to believe things are as bad as they are, because it means massive upheaval. And I had to give up my job in London, working on my own. Well, I worked for people, but I lived on my own, and I prided myself on the fact that I was paying all my own bills, living in a very, very small 1-bedroom flat, but very happy there. The thought of giving all that up and going home to live with my mum was just devastating. It was awful. But I realised I had no choice in the end, and that was awful. But it was the best thing that ever happened to me 15, 16 years later. Hey, I'm here. Things are much better now. But
Yeah.
I love what Andrew said. The fact that they broke their end of the deal. They kind of,
Yeah.
it was the shove
Abby, I think you're right
needed.
on this thing of how do we know what's the objective test? Because as soon as emotions and personal subjectivity are thrown in, and of course, like you're saying, the whole everything about our society and work relations and everything tell you to sort of, come on, just, get down to it, and you can battle through this, and all of that kind of stuff. And yeah, at a low level, that's true. You need a bit of that just to sometimes just, it's a bit cold outside, and like, come on, get on with it. You might be living
Yeah,
in the
we
North
could do
Pole,
this.
this kind of thing. But too much of that is obviously really unhealthy and over too long a period. But this is, I think you really hit the target with this thing. How do we know? What's the objective test? How can we measure?
How do you
I
know when
guess
you? How do you know
I
when you're
guess
approaching burnout?
yeah, and I guess
I
it's
mean,
very important to have partners around you or friends around you who just mirror yourself. What's up with you? You're different. You're just kind of programmed robot who's walking around or something. I experienced sleeping issues as well. Just thinking and thinking and thinking the crazy circle. So I guess that's a very important thing, and also was kind of releasing way to met a person who just mirrored very, very, I would say, neutral and clear what I do, and that was so uncomfortable. Yeah.
but Joe, I mean, you mentioned this awful thing where you just came into work one morning and you literally couldn't see properly, and that was obviously that was a really clear warning signal. But actually, ideally, you needed to have taken action way before this. This was much too serious. And I think the same for everybody's stories. There should have been a way. It would have been better outcome if we managed to turn the thing around before it got so bad.
But the thing is, what do you do? Do qigong, but then that like John said, that might maintain a difficult situation for a long period of time.
Yeah, I mean, personally, for me, one of the after this had happened, I went through a process which meant that I did actually get treated more fairly by the company, because I was able to actually
Good.
get support and advice, yeah, it settled in a way that was acceptable. But actually, along the way, I started to explore stress, and the thing that really came up for me was that. We need to have an awareness when we're going through a difficult patch, as opposed to staying in a difficult situation. If you're going through a difficult patch, and we will all have difficult patches, we will all have things that happen. if you're using practices, awareness practices, such as Qigong, in an effective way, you can recognize it for what it is, and you can allow yourself to go kind of across the bell curve of this is a difficult patch we can get through. You can still see the light at the end of the tunnel. There's a wonderful quote, and I'm going to unashamedly, it's a half man, half biscuit lyric that I love, which is, the light at the end of the tunnel is the light of an oncoming train. In that situation, the kind of hope that you see is the thing that's going to wreck you. That's the point that you get into trouble. But I think if you can keep that sort of awareness of, no, things are going to change, and as long as I stay with myself in this situation, as long as I stay true to myself in this situation, I can get through it. And I think that's kind of the difference to me, because we will go through difficulty, but it's when you weirdly lose sight and you don't even notice you've done it. When you lose sight of the hope that sits beyond, that's when I think you need to actually go, right, stop. And this is why I come up with the, sorry, back to you in a second, Andrew. This is why I started getting so passionate about the idea of nobody feels chi, because so often I was taught by my teachers that you need to feel chi, you need to feel chi. And every day when I went and practiced, I felt chi because I was in so much need. Now, if I then go, I'm not feeling chi, I'm feeling change. And if the change I'm feeling as a result of the Qigong is the same every day, that says that every day, the thing that it felt so good to get rid of, I've grabbed back so that I can get rid of it again. I'm now in a cycle of suffering because my experience of Qigong is the same every single day. And it shouldn't be. Your experience of any practice like this should change with the seasons. It should change with the cycles that are going on around you. But if it's consistent, it says you're stuck. Ooh, juicy one. Sorry, Andrew, you had your hand up for a moment there.
Yeah, I'm going to go. I'm going to go back to the previous half of what you said, because I'm still processing the second half. You mentioned several times the word awareness and things like "can you see?" Blah, blah, blah. And ironically, I think that's one of the things about Qigong that sometimes it feels like it's doing us good, but perhaps in the long run it's doing us harm. Which is that it should be, as I see it, it should be a practice that gives you better awareness of yourself physically, mentally, spiritually, awareness of the world around you in every way, awareness of all those points of contact and everything. So it should all be about awareness. But as soon as you started talking about that, I suddenly realized that actually when I was in a bad place, I was using it for the opposite. I was using practice as a way to tune out and not have awareness. It was like it was a retreat moment. It was a me moment in the thing that Abby was mentioning. This need for time for yourself. It definitely was that, but it was time that it was escapist. It was totally escapist, and so it did feel good. And those moments of escape gave a kind of reset that allowed you to battle through the next day. But as soon as John said awareness, I was just thinking, yeah, now there's a danger sign that when your practice is no longer making you more aware, but it's making you less aware, perhaps that's a danger sign. But here's the problem. How do you get awareness of being less aware? Because you see what I'm saying? Just when you need to be noticing, you're deliberately not noticing. You're deliberately putting kind of spiritual blinkers on. And
Yeah. Oh, so well said.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in
Yeah.
quickly on that, because I think it's really interesting, because I think awareness also comes with perspective. And sometimes you need to be able to step out of a situation and have an alternative experience in order to gain perspective on what's going on. And so I think that we can say that we're hiding from something, but there's a difference between hiding from something and taking a moment to get it to actually frame things differently. And I think there's a subtle difference to actually recognize there. I'll shut
it
up.
sounded from what John and Joseph said, that there was a particular moment for both of you, a kind of cathartic moment where something happened that was so bad that it actually gave you that perspective, that distancing. And I was going to ask Abby, was there? I don't want to pry into details, but just like yes or no,
No, tell me, ask
if you
me
don't want to say
anything.
more, was there like a specific thing that went, this is it, or was it more? Did you
I
get a
think it
gradual?
was in 2010. It was pretty bad anyway. But then my stepdad died, and my my real dad is wonderful, and I love him very much. But my stepdad had been there since I was 16, and I was in my roughly mid-30s at this point in 2010. And it wasn't a shock. We knew he was dying of cancer. We knew he'd had 1 to 3 years, and he made it to 2. But it was like, they say the straw that broke the camel's back. It was like the anvil. It was some big thing that just went, and I realised I can't carry on like this. I can't do this. And little conversations with people. I remember at the funeral, I mentioned to a couple of people, they said, "Oh, just carry on working. Just keep your head down and carry on." I'm like, in my body, I'm like, I can't carry on. I can't. It was like trying to go through concrete. Life was like trying to get through this wall, and I couldn't do it. So that was a big thing. And then a couple of conversations with people that had worked where I was working, who didn't really speak to each other, but they separately said almost the same thing on the phone. I'd call them every now and then. I had this silly mindset. I didn't want to be a burden to anyone. I didn't really want to talk to anyone. And I've got so many friends now that I know I can talk to, and they can talk to me. But both of them said, go to the doctor, get signed off with stress. And I thought they sort of meant like pretend to be signed off with stress or kind of fake it. But I think they knew. I don't know how to phrase that. It comes out wrong. But I thought I was
I
faking how
recognise
ill I
that. I
was.
think John's doing the same. Yeah.
John is relating there, I think. But I felt like a fraud. You know what? Like I said, if you think things are as bad as they are, if you think you're imagining things are as bad as they probably are. And I think I didn't realise. And I was signed off work for a month, hoping to get some therapy. And I had the doctor was brilliant. Both doctors I spoke to, really young doctors, they looked about 12, these young ladies. They were so emotionally mature and handled it so well. I was so surprised. I waited and waited for counselling, and they said, if you're in a crisis, no one explained to me what a crisis was. And one day at home, I was probably in a crisis. I wasn't going to end my life, but I was in a very, very bad way. And I just felt like I need to talk to someone, but I don't know who. Where do I go? And I called the number, and they said, well, are you in a crisis? And I stupidly said no, because I didn't know what that was. And I should have said yes. But no one had explained to me what this crisis thing was. And I just carried on. In the end, I quit my job. I went home to live with my mum. And when I did, I would go for walks. She lives in Acton, in Sudbury, and it's a lovely, lovely place to go for walks twice a day. I realised I was healing myself just for going for walks in nature.
Yeah.
Maybe that in a way was sort of a Qigong type thing. It really healed me. And I remember there was one particular, I don't want to talk too much, but there was one particular day I went for a walk, and it was early spring. And you know how changeable the weather can be in England at that time of year. I was at the bottom of a field, a really green field. It's the greenest green. And the sky was a slaty grey, and a rainbow appeared. And I stood there and went, wow. I nearly didn't experience this because I thought I'd been close to ending it all because I was in a very bad way. And I just felt so lucky just to be alive. That sounds daft, but that was me in 2010. And I remember walking back from that walk and seeing people and went, did you see that rainbow? And they were like, yeah, here we are. Because I was so like, but it was such a beautiful time. But that's kind of a bit of that story from back then, but it was horrible. And I've never felt so lost. I've always known what I was going to do. I always had a plan. And it was the first time in my life I just felt like I was in a boat in the ocean, not knowing what to do. There's a song by Motorhead called Lost in the Ozone. It's quite a gentle song. You think of Motorhead, really heavy songs, but there's a song called Lost in the Ozone. And there's a couple of lines in that just felt like that. I'm in a hungry, empty sea. There is no one on earth to rescue me. That's kind of how I just felt. I felt lost at sea. But it was the best thing that ever happened to me because I rebuilt everything from scratch. And I feel like I've just answered the question and then some, sorry. Never ask me a question. You'll get an hour's worth.
I think it's such an interesting observation, though, because if you talk about that, where Qigong can be before, during, and after, I think that process of coming out the other side of it and understanding how these practices can be beneficial in rebuilding, because I think one of the ideas for me that sits within Qigong is that we create an environment within ourselves to have the experience that we have of life. So to explain that, if you look at some of the strong narratives that are around today, certainly the strong political narratives, the way that it can be so polarized and so divisive, and yet both sides feel as if they're correct, means that the environment within each individual creates that perception, that perspective of stuff. And so I think it's really interesting to observe that going on. But I think if we flip it back to burnout, the environment that or the way that we approach life creates the potential for these things to happen. And sometimes it's okay to use the analogy of a car. Sometimes something goes wrong with the car and you go and fix the car. Sometimes things go wrong with the car and you've got to just go, right, it's time for a new car. And to me, burnout is time for a new car. So it's like we need to find a way to actually find meaning, find something valuable for ourselves, that's nourishing for ourselves, that's supportive. But it isn't to say that we should forget the experience we had before. And I know that Joe and I have had a conversation around this. I hadn't realized until recently what the long-term effects of burnout were for me. Because I can still feel myself responding in similar ways to when things were at their worst in certain situations. I can still notice those things happening. And there's part of me that goes, surely I should be able to heal that. But actually, there's also a part of me that goes, no, there's still aspects of me from where I was before that are still there and are still able to experience that. And as long as I'm able to experience it, I won't forget it and I will keep learning.
And you won't, and you'll treat it. Yeah, I think you need to treat those things as a sign that your body or something, your mind and body is saying, you're doing too much, you need to rest now.
Absolutely.
And as much as you
That's the
might
red
hate
line.
it, inconsiderate, inconvenient as it seems, you've got to go, okay, then I won't exercise today, or if you've got commitments, do them, but then build in rest. Like for me, Saturday's rest day.
Joe, you're about to say something.
Yeah, a lot of stuff in my head, but I don't want to cut into the conversation. I just have an image which came to me when I was burnout, when my girlfriend asked me how that feels like, and so for me it was more like burn in, just too much, lost yourself, and it was like a candle in the room, a small candle in the room. The room is empty. The room is dark, just a burning candle, and the room has windows and doors, and as far or as more as I'm in burnout, more doors and windows closes, and the oxygen is less, and the candle starts to stop burning. And that was my red line where I experienced, okay, if I don't do anything, and I have a very dark night as well, Abby, with kind of suicidal thoughts and stuff, because that was the moment where the candle was at the decision level, I would say, if it turns to off or on. And it was like, okay, that's the emotional ballast which comes right now into my face. I can't handle it. It's too heavy. It's too difficult to do that. And yeah, that's the red line, which I also experience when I have too many projects, too many clients, too much stress in my life, whatever that means. And then I say to myself, I don't have anything. I don't have to deliver this project. Okay, I lose this client. Okay, the client is angry. Don't give a shit. It's my life. I go for me. That is my healthiness. I can sell anything or everything I own and can survive. I don't have a problem about that. I would say, develop the skill of releasing is I guess, the most important part I learned from that.
It's such an interesting image, isn't it? Because there's, and I think we need to, I'd like to kind of clarify releasing, because I think that it feels so difficult in certain situations, because releasing sounds like getting rid of, never to get it back. It sounds like discard.
I met it, yeah.
And it's really not. It's more about stop holding on to it. Put it to one side, allow it to be, give to yourself. and then you
Mm,
and
mm.
you can go and pick it up later if you decide you want to.
Yeah.
That to me feels like the nature of releasing. And that's been repeated to me over and over again in the work I've been doing since that experience, when we're working with people in very difficult situations, that the idea of release, dissolve, let go, it's so difficult to express it in simple terms that give people the potential to go, I don't need to get rid of everything.
I have another story for that. Just a very quick one. When I was in Burnout, I was in my own flat and I came across minimalism. And I sold almost everything. I would say I owned 40 items. And that was my experience of releasing anything or everything what I owned.
Oh, you
And
let
then
go that way.
years later on, I experienced, okay, well, I've done that. I just saw the photos. I took a photo of every single piece which I sold and stuff. And like, oh, okay, that thing I miss. Oh, I can't take it back. But then I would say step one step further to buy just high quality clothes, for example, and things I really love. And I came around, how is she called? Mary blah 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 something. It's like a cleanup queen. So was in television. Can't remember the name. And it was exactly like that. And that's also the cross link to Qigong. If it gives you joy, that's the right direction. Yeah, sometimes you have to go into the cold weather. Yeah, but the primary thing is, does it give you joy or not? If it's not giving you joy to practice Qigong, get rid of it. Sometimes I think, I don't want to jump in the morning practice. Yeah, don't give a shit. Don't go. Or go and or go with an open mind and let yourself surprise what happened. Well,
When it comes to letting go, I think that I've let go of loads of stuff, but I haven't known how to. And in our culture, we're not taught how to or what that exactly is. And I suspect a lot of my illnesses, I had very bad eczema as a kid, and then I had a very bad bowel condition, ulcerative colitis, in my 20s. I wonder how much of that was sort of stored trauma from all the worry and angst and the energy that you can store from other people. So I have hundreds of customers now, and I know pretty much all of them individually. And their energy, I've learned to let go of their energy at the end of the day now, but I used to take it home with me. What I do when I get home is I change into different clothes. I'm home Abby then. And that kind of, I take off, and wear comfy, slumpy clothes, and that kind of helps. But Qigong, the lift you up, put you down, when I did it just before Christmas, even though I've been doing it on the Zoom calls in the morning, when I did the lessons that you've done on school, which are really good, and you go through them, and the kind of the reasons behind all the movements, when I did it one day, I'm like, wow, I feel like I've dropped a load of shit. That sounds a horrible way of putting it, but there's all this, it's like the vacuum cleaner's been emptied. That's a much nicer, well, slightly nicer thing to imagine. But I feel like I've emptied the thing that I didn't need now. But how it's Qigong seems to be, apart from say walking, I meditate, that helps. It's not for everyone. Tai Chi helps me let go of stuff in the evening. I don't do it every evening, but Qigong allows me to release stuff. But without those things, which I didn't always do up until, like when I recovered from ulcerative colitis the first time in 2002, I knew something had to change in my life, but I didn't know what, so I didn't, because I didn't know what it was. I was still going to work, being treated like, badly, and going back home and watching television, and that was my life. But that's at that time I was doing Pilates, and there was a lesson called Body Balance, and the lady that taught it, she was really funny and lovely, and it was a combination of Qigong, Tai Chi, and yoga to music, and I loved it. I think maybe that helped me heal, but that was my first experience of what I thought was my maybe Qi or the effects of Qi, because I would feel it in my tummy and think, I was only 25 or 26 at the time. I'm thinking, what is this feeling? It's really nice, but it's weird and wobbly. And maybe in that area I needed healing because ulcerative colitis affects your tummy, and I don't know. But it was, we're not taught how to let go of stuff. And there's that expression, these mountains you're carrying, you are only meant to climb them. Well, I say, screw the mountains. Let's stuff them. We don't need them. Just, I usually say another word instead of stuff the mountains, but I'm not going to say that. Begins with an F.
Yeah.
But the idea of dropping stuff you don't need, you can't see, like with burnout, you can't see how stressed you are. You don't know how stressed you are because you know you're stressed, but you can't see it. And it's like these burdens we're carrying. Yeah. How do we know we're carrying them, and how do we know how to put them down? Because
There
it's
was a
not like we've got
comment.
emotional happiness.
There was a comment I remember Andrew making a few weeks ago in a conversation we had, where he was saying about previous experiences around these types of practice. It felt as if you were trying to do something, and within the Jennings approach, it feels as if there's space to not have to do something. And just kind of also to reflect on what Joe was saying there about coming into the morning practice, the number of people who say to me at one point or another, I turn on the morning practice, but I quite often don't do what you say to do. Sometimes I don't do any Qigong at all. I just sit there and listen to you. Actually, sometimes even knowing that the morning practice is going on is enough to give me a bit of space. And it's a really strange thing, because I know many Qigong teachers who are going, no, people need to practice Qigong in the way that and I'm like, no, people need to have the space so they can gain a little perspective. They can let go of stuff to the extent that it's going to serve them better during the day. Because it's when we create that little bit of space, invite that bit more potential to come in.
Perspective is such a powerful thing, and space in that sense is such a powerful thing that I didn't learn until about 2010 or 11. And there's a book I read from an author that I've now discovered is in the Epstein files, so I won't go there.
There's probably a few.
I ain't going to mention who he is, but your thoughts are not you. You are not your thoughts. And someone told me that as a kid. I'd been, but it was mind blowing to hear that in my mid 30s. And that gave me a perspective between who I am as a person and what I'm thinking. What I'm thinking isn't who I am. And it's that kind of perspective that all sorts of things can do, where you can go, my behaviour isn't who I am. It's just the software I'm running, is the way he described it. Sorry to mention the files. But yeah, that idea of perspective and space between who you are and what's going on in your life.
That
can allow you to begin to release stuff, allow you to begin to let stuff go, because you realise it isn't you. It's not like you're going to pull an arm out your body and leave it somewhere. It's actually stuff you don't need.
That's an interesting thing. Is it the analogy to software versions? When you're in burnout, or are you able to prevent burnout? The first question, and the second is a burnout just time to upgrade to V2 or 3 or whatever? Like, okay, you're right now human OS 1.5. Now it's time for you to update to 2.0 because we're in a different age or something, right? Is that just a kind of process, more spiritually spoken maybe, of transforming humans into a next kind of time age? That they are prepared for awareness, for openness, for connectiveness.
Yeah. It is like
I'm going to stop the second talk, and I'm going to pass it to Andrew for a moment.
Your core, isn't it? Yeah, I've got a software update going on.
But one of the things we hate about our devices is when they run worse and worse and worse, because they're trying to force us to update. And I think with our devices, but also with ourselves, we should be able to have a way of updating that doesn't have to go through crisis. But I really wanted to come back to something. This is both John and Abby. But there is a computer metaphor for this one as well, which is the where, you know, if you click certain buttons or you do certain things inside some piece of some app or whatever, they're context specific. They don't have the same effect depending where you are inside the app. And we all know about that, and that can be really frustrating when you're trying to get help, because you say, I click this thing and it doesn't do whatever, and the technician is there and he's clicking it and it's working, but he's not actually in the same place that you are. And I think this is really relevant to this whole sort of burnout discussion or whatever, because, I mean, Abby described some of the two things that were very, very healing for her, and these are things that many people report. So these are powerful things. I'm not trying to say that your experience was not significant. I mean the opposite. So you talked about going for walks and seeing something beautiful in nature and appreciating it. And those are very, very often mentioned. They're really basic, healthy things. And in a certain way, it's like, duh, of course, when you feel bad, go for a walk, stop and look at the sunsets, stop and smell the roses. These are such obvious things. But if anybody had told you that a few weeks earlier, you'd have just, oh, come on,
Yeah,
leave me alone.
it
I
would have
know,
been a barrier.
you weren't in the situation, although those are the appropriate buttons to press. You
Mm,
weren't in the situation where you could press them or
mm,
where they would have the good effect for you. And you had to do enough healing that you could then do these bits of healing, which helped you a whole lot more.
mhm,
And this is something that my Tai Chi teacher used to say a lot, and I really like it, which is that he's, some of the, in Tai Chi it tends to be very specific. You've got to be in this precise position, and often you can't. Your body simply won't go there. I'm not 21 anymore, and probably I couldn't do it at 21 either. And what my teacher always said, which I thought was very wise, was, don't torture yourself with this, but do what you can do and do some good stuff. And little by little, you'll be able to go further. And one day you'll get to the place you're supposed to be. Actually, I don't quite agree with the last sentence. I think the journey is the thing anyway. So
mm.
trying, you must know this story. I'm a musician, but so you must know this story about the famous cellist Paul Casals, um, and at the age of 80 or 90 or something, he was still practicing every day. And they asked him why he did it, and he said, "Well, I'm getting the feeling that I'm beginning to get somewhere."
Oh,
And I think that's really nice that
Yeah.
and this also goes back to something that John said, that your practice needs to be changing. If you are just doing the same thing every day in the same situation, then that's the definition of insanity, expecting any new outcome if you just keep doing the same thing. But it's going to change as you get older, not always in an improving way, but it changes and you learn to live with it, and you're learning new things from it. And I think all of that. There's this stuff about the John was saying that your practice should be evolving, changing, adapting, whatever it should. No, but I think this thing of this is the thing that gets us into burnout, and it's the terribly hard thing of trying to get out. Is that as you're right in the pit there on the way down, um, the things that would get you out of it, you literally cannot do. And they could be such simple things. And I think it's really important for anybody who's teaching any kind of therapy, anything like this, that you keep a lot of sympathy, empathy for people who are in that, because the solutions, I mean, like Abby said, go for a walk, look at a sunset. It is that simple. But when somebody's right in the bottom there, they have to find their own way to that place before they can move on. And so that, again, this is a question we've been asking quite a few times. How do we know? How do we have the awareness? When Abby's thing is, when do you know that this is the pits? What's do we really have to go to the point where we have some, terrible experience before we can let go? And is there, and maybe that's a more important thing than, like, what I thought that this talk was going to be: how can we use Qigong to get out of burnout? But actually, maybe how can we, or how can we just, is it possible to, but what can we use to get an awareness that we may be heading for burnout and to get out of it while we still can? So I was given a fantastic book on depression, and it does give you some ideas of how to get out of it. But actually, most of the book concentrates on, this is how you know that you're getting into it. When you see these are the red lights, these are the warning signs, and act now, because the longer you leave it, the harder it gets.
It's so hard to know what to do. I mean, I went to the doctor and was lucky to be seen, but someone was supposed to call me and give me some therapy. This is back in 2010. And it was February, I think it was late January, I got a phone call. Oh, so when I called and said, I'm in a really bad way, and they said, are you in a crisis? I never got any help. It was only when I went home to live with my mum that I started to heal. And then someone called me late January. Do you still need help? And I was like, really? And I was very
Yeah.
polite to this man, but I was a little bit short with him, and he was so apologetic. Yeah, when do you know? There's something else I was going to say. What it was?
Can I
Yeah.
just? My
I
sense
have to
is that
say,
we.
I think that question of "Are you in a crisis?" I just think that's a question you shouldn't ask. I think the
Yeah, are
first
you a
question
crisis?
is,
Not
"Hello,
even a
what would you
crisis.
like
It
to
was like
talk
that.
about?"
I don't
Because
know.
anybody who's picked up that number, they've called that number. Either they're in a crisis
Yeah,
or somebody close to them
yeah,
is. But
yeah,
anyway, just do it open. You know, what do you want to
yeah.
talk about?
Yeah, like I
Yeah,
didn't know what words to use. So when you know there's a problem, what do you do? Like what words do you use? Who do you go to? Like at the time I had those two friends that I could speak to on the phone, but I had a very small, if any, network of friends. I'm really lucky now, I'm really, really well connected. It's ironic
it,
that we're all connected via the internet and there's so much isolation. I
it,
don't know how that's going to help anyway, but yeah.
I'd like to pick up just on just as kind of a closing idea for me. And there was two things that are kind of hovering around this. One is that Abby, you said about is going and walking in nature qigong. Um, I think that for me, if I look at what is qigong, my way of translating it is becoming more skillful with your energy. So therefore, going and walking in nature is becoming more skillful with your energy.
I thought so.
Practicing yoga is becoming more skillful with your
Yeah.
energy. To me, all of these sit under this big umbrella term of Qigong. And I'm not trying to lay claim to everything. It's just that I think we need to recognize that there is a consistent thing that sits within all of these experiences, which is becoming more skillful with the way that you use your energy. And that is the title that is given to the practice of Qigong. Whether or not it is actually taught in that way, that's a conversation for another day. But the other thing I would also put in is that in retrospect, and we talk about not getting into these places, one of the greatest gifts that I've had in life is that experience, because that was the invitation to change everything. And I think it's really interesting that, and Joe's analogy of the room with the candle and all the doors and the windows closing. There's kind of one option which is open the same doors and windows again and get going again, or there's another option of open a different door. I think sometimes we need to experience these places that really question the way that we are, and different people will experience that in different ways. Some people will be holding on to things. I'm somebody who I'm a bit fighty, I'm a bit controversial, but I have a tendency to hang on to stuff. I'm like a dog with a bone on occasions, which means that I'm more prone to hold on to something for too long until it burns me. Other people are a little bit more aware. He says as a Qigong teacher, other people are a little bit more aware. They hold things more lightly, and it means that they're able to then move through and change more easily. But I think that, just to reinforce what Abby's saying, to have somebody who will listen to you and to have the bravery to step forward and go, no, this is feeling dangerous. This is feeling, it's a bit like when you're filling in the forms to apply for whatever. What is you on your worst day? You need to be willing to embrace that side of the conversation when you go for help, and not actually, I've managed to pick up the phone today, so I'm feeling a bit better. No, I've managed to pick up the phone today because yesterday was horrific and tomorrow could be just the same. That feels like the thing we need to be saying to people there. Okay, so sorry, that was a very long. Well, that was a far longer bit of just summing up, but it'd be interesting to know if there's what everybody kind of would like to put in as a final comment on this.
Well, in a way, John, I know already you're not going to like this comment, but when Abby asked, when I go for a walk, is that Qigong? And my answer was going to be, were you breathing at the time?
Yeah, I wasn't even thinking about breathing. I hadn't even discovered the breathing thing yet. So no, it's not Qigong.
But I think you were breathing, and that's kind of the point. That's the kind of the point, which is the same as John's point, that since whatever you're doing during your life, you're going to be breathing, at least if you're doing it for more than 5
Yeah.
minutes. So it then becomes, in that kind of view where
Okay.
Qi is all about breath.
Yeah.
That's why I said it would annoy John, because it's a thing of his that Qi is not. It's not all about breath. It's about energy.
I wasn't thinking
And
about breathing, but I was breathing. It wasn't. I hadn't discovered the whole breath work, because I know you love that term, John.
yeah.
I
But
did.
something, but something in that walk, just by the fact that the way you talk about it now, that you can, looking back on it, you can see it as a step in your in your healing. Something about that walk, you were focused. You were looking at something else, something different in that moment, and that's what made it healing. And so there's this thing of energy. Another way, I mustn't sound like a Qigong teacher, but from what I've been taught and from what I've heard, then the other thing of energy, it's actually attention. And we say where you put your energy, but also it's where you put your attention. And maybe that's the really crucial thing, that this awareness, this awareness thing is also, it's crucially to do with attention. And can we find the way that when we're in near crisis, that somehow we find the way to widen the perspective, rather than going, okay, I've got this demand and I've got this thing I've got to do the next 5 minutes, and these things are all hanging over me, and blah 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 blah. What is the way that you stand back from it and give your attention in a better way, but not just what is the thing that lets you stand back from it and actually not pay attention to anything, because that is soothing, but it's not healing.
Yeah.
Really insightful.
But I've got a question. I posed the question, but where's the answer?
Is there an answer?
Well,
Doesn't matter.
maybe the question itself is the question, in the sense that, John, in the beginning of morning practice, you very often start, okay, comfortable stance, and then just observe your state. So pay some attention. But then the question is to what you should be paying, what should you be paying this attention to? And maybe that's a sort of a deep question that it might be worth spending, a minute or two on every so often, not every day, but every so often in a Qigong class. What are you paying attention to? And it could be the normal things we talk about in Qigong morning class, but maybe there's something more important in your life. Maybe there's something really big going on. Maybe there's something great about to happen. Maybe there's something terrible about to happen. But where should you really be paying attention? And just spend a moment on that. Where are you pretending to put your attention in order not to think about the things that are too scary to think about, and so on.
I think that all sits within that question. And I also think that the practice of Qigong is ultimately a question. It's not an answer. There is not an answer. Because the answer is within you. It isn't within the practice. The Qigong is the question that we ask of ourselves. But that sounds like opening for a whole new conversation, and I'm not this one. Anything else, just kind of to wrap up, Abby and Joe?
I guess one thought comes up. I'm really thankful or grateful, or whatever you say in English, to have this kind of format, to have the community. For myself, the worst thing you can do when you're in a crisis, you're in burnout, whatever, to be alone.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, I was totally alone. But then I went home to live with my mum, and that's when I healed. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's what I needed rather than what I wanted.
Yeah. The second thing is having people around you who are 100% honest with you and don't want to be too sympathetic with you. Empathetic, but not sympathetic.
Yeah, they teach that in counselling.
God. And there's another can of worms that we should talk about on another day. The way that we do, as practitioners, how we can be more supportive for the people around us without reinforcing issue. But yeah, these are conversations that I think we should have in future versions of this. And this is just the first part of the conversation. So at this point, I'm just going to say if you're looking at the recording, I really hope you've enjoyed the conversation. If you want to get involved in the conversations moving forwards, if you're in our school community, just come along to them. If you're not in the school community, why the hell not? Right. Okay. On that note, I'm saying goodbye. Bye.